Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I found in my travels. Today I don't want to talk about a specific book that I read, but rather I want to do my usual wrap-up and TBR video, what I read in July and what I plan to read in August. Last month I had a number of good books that I read and some stinkers, and I thought I'd read more than I did, but as it turns out, the trip that I took to the Washington wilderness kind of prevented me from doing a lot of reading, which isn't a bad thing. I very much enjoyed that break from reality in general. So what I did was I went to the Washington wilderness, I hung out with some friends, and I officiated a wedding, which you don't do very often. It was tons of fun, and it's always great to see your friends get married, and just to celebrate love and all that entails, and also eat hamburgers, which are also nice. Some other things that came up is I've been challenged by Lucas over at the Bits of Lit to a challenge to read Swamp Thing, Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. I definitely accept, but I'll make a video probably around mid-August with big presentation as I usually do to accept his challenge. Go over to the Bits of Lit, see his challenge video, which I'll link to in the description. Call him a scoundrel, call him a villain, as is appropriate, and make sure he knows that I'm coming for his golden shawl. But also, something that I've been meaning to mention for a while, but haven't had a chance to do so, is the intro to my videos that I have now, with the planet spinning, it's green, and it says Around the Weird. That was actually made by Lucas over at the Bits of Lit. So definitely, while you're also calling him a scoundrel and a villain and just the worst human alive, make sure he also knows that he is a quality human being for making such a great intro that I really enjoy using. So he's very talented in that regard, even if he is deplorable in many other ways. And so that's pretty much all I have to say. So let's move into the wrap-up and TBR. I'll do the wrap-up first, followed by what I plan to read in August, and we'll move on from there. So what did I read in July? Well, in terms of my wrap-up and in terms of books, I read Midnight Days. That was one of the first things I read. Midnight Days is a collection of Neil Gaiman stories. Some of the stuff that didn't really fit in any of his other collections, and I thought it was a little bit of fun. Some of the stories were not for me, but there was one story about Swamp Thing, which I thought was really interesting, where Swamp Thing was kind of like it really reflected on what Swamp Thing had seen and sort of viewed him in a sort of mythological sense, which Neil Gaiman is great at. Like, he's really wonderful at that sort of thing. So Midnight Days was a lot of fun, but it's also pretty clear that like these were the bottom of the barrel kind of Neil Gaiman stories where they didn't have a place to put it, so they just put them all together and sent them on their way. So, I don't think it's as essential to read, but there are a couple stories that I find truly fascinating. So definitely be on the lookout for that. And then I also read The Hobbit by Tolkien, which I thought was okay. That was part of a read-along with my friend Cassie. She wanted to read some fantasy, which is her kind of thing, science fiction fantasy. I decided to read The Hobbit because that was on my TBR for this year, but also I had read The Lord of the Rings and I wanted to follow up with The Hobbit. And I just thought it was okay. Like, it didn't have the urgency or the importance or the sort of like emotional moments that the Lord of the Rings series has, but it also doesn't need to have those. I realized this, it's pretty much like on me that I don't like it. It's not bad. It's a great adventure story. It's just not what I was expecting. Also, Cassie had listened to the audiobook that was narrated by the guy who voices Gollum. And I forget his name. I'll put it up here somewhere. But maybe that's why she enjoyed it so much, because he was such a quality narrator in that regard. So that's something to consider too. I also read Martereau by Nathalie Sarraute, which was a French story from the 1950s. I thought it was pretty awful in terms of dialogue. dialogue, the way the dialogue is written with an overuse of ellipses, a lack of separation of paragraphs. It's just long paragraphs that take forever to read and get through. Because it's translated from the French, it's a bit a bit difficult to read, I think, in the literal way that they kind of translated it. So it's partially on the translation, but also the dialogue is bad. The story isn't very good. I think there's a reason why I've never heard of this story before, even though it's so old, and that's because it's simply not very good. I don't think it's a matter of me not enjoying it. I think it's a matter of I don't know who this story is for, because the message ultimately seems to be, hey, watch out, rich people, be careful who your friends are, or something like that, which is a weird message to have. I ended up reading it on both the bus ride and the plane to and from Washington, and I just got to say that's probably the only reason I even finished it, which is the worst thing you can say about a book, is that you read it because it was there rather than because it was good. And so generally I would say, avoid this book. It's possibly one of the worst that I've ever read for this channel. And then I also read on the same bus and plane ride, Spider-Man the Gauntlet Part 1, which I thought was good. There was a story about Spider-Man facing off against Norman Osborn that was high quality, especially given that Norman Osborn had a high position of power after sort of saving humanity in the Secret Invasion. And I thought the Gauntlet was really interesting and sort of highlighting Electro's story, as well as other superhero, like Sandman as well, like other superheroes. So the fight that he has to deal with, and I just generally enjoyed it. Like I really need to read more Spider-Man comics because I find myself enjoying most of them. And I do think that one is worth seeking out. And hopefully I'm gonna find the Gauntlet Part 2 and other installments, so I can really see what progresses from there. I also read True Biz by Sarah Novich, which I thought was really good. It was a story about the deaf community and sort of the issues that they face, and also about the interpersonal relationships that are going on in there. It doesn't really have too much of a story, or at least I think the story takes a while to kick off, but when it does, it really wows me, and I especially loved the ending where the characters have to consider whether or not they're going to straight up burn like a hearing aid facility. I wouldn't call it a hearing aid facility. It was more along the lines of like an assistive listening device, that an implant, like you implant it in your head, but that also hurts the deaf community in some way. And so like fighting back against your oppressors seemed to be like a big theme of that. And yeah, I thought it was a really good story, and it might have been the best one of the month had it not been for another story that I read. Coincidentally, this was also a Bevan read, because True Biz was for book club, whereas the other one was for one of the recommendations from the Google Drive. I also read Crush by Jason Hall, which was a comic book about a girl who transforms into a monster and fights against other monsters. And I don't know, it was kind of bland. I thought it was trying to do too many things at once. It also didn't really bother to answer any of the questions that were raised by the story itself, probably because it thought it was getting a sequel. And that's probably one of the worst things you can do. Never assume that you're getting a sequel in comic books, because if you don't answer your questions, then it's gonna be forever like an incomplete piece of work, in my opinion. And so yeah, it was just forgettable, and I'm probably not going to remember it after this month, or even after finishing this video. And then I also read Fleishman is in Trouble by Taffy Brodesser Ackner, which I thought was the best of the month. Again, it's a Bevan recommendation. Go check out my video for my complete thoughts on everything, but I really enjoyed it as it was an exploration of divorce and marriage and love, and what happens when that love doesn't work out, as well as an exploration of feminism. Something I didn't mention in the video, but was was something I was thinking about as I was reading it was the notion of Jewish suffering, because the character Toby Fleischman is Jewish. And Bevan pointed out it was more along the lines of Jewish persistence, but the idea that for centuries, Jewish people have dealt with suffering and harmful things being done to their people, but they've always persisted through it. And that's sort of reflected in Toby's character, where he's dealing with a lot of things in his divorce. He's dealing with a lot of mental health concerns, as well as the physical stress of trying to be there for his kids and also trying to figure out what's going on with his ex-wife. But he persists through all of it. And I think giving up is not really an option for Toby, because the Jewish people themselves have never given up through the years. So I think that's one of the themes that's touched upon, that you can very easily make an argument for as to what Taffy Brodesser-Akner is trying to say there. And then I read a number of short stories through the month of July, including Pippi Longstocking, which I thought was funny, The Shawl, which was a heartbreaking Holocaust story. I'm very interested in reading the more longer format novel of that was turned into, because I think it'd be a pretty quality story. I also read the Necklace by Guy de Maupassant, the French author. I thought it was pretty good. I very much enjoyed the twist ending, where the woman finds out that the necklace that she thought was of great value was actually just a cheap replica. So kind of touching upon a lot of the themes explored in that story there. And then I also read Lihaf, or The Quilt, which was a solid story from India. Always good to read short stories from other countries, but I especially like how controversial for its time it is, and like the ideas that she's touching upon, like same-sex relationships and the needs that people have and whatnot. And it was a very interesting short story. I was kind of amazed that someone would be writing that, especially in the 1940s. But as my friend, one of my Indian friends tells me, that was kind of inevitable, because she was one of the educated women of the time, and a lot of the educated women were already thinking that. So very interesting things to consider there. And then I also read a number of great poems, all of which had an LGBT poet attached to it, as part of my exploration of pride poetry. Definitely recommend you go out and seek that. It's always good to talk about LGBTQA poets. I'm probably not going to be focusing on as many in the month of August, but I'm still looking forward to talking about high quality poetry. Now, as for my TBR, what do I plan on reading in the month of August? In terms of books, I am currently reading Catch-22, which was planned for July, but things got backed up because I had left the state. I'm reading it right now, and it's very funny. I don't know if it's intentionally funny or not, because it seems like the ideas that they're talking about, it's probably like intentionally funny, but it'd be weird if it wasn't, like if this was just an unintentional humor. But I do like what they're talking about the military and paradoxes and sending like human beings to war and not letting them ever come home. It's a terrifying experience, and I'm really enjoying my read through so far. I also plan on reading The Princess Bride by William Goldman. I had read the movie before, but I've never read the book, and this is also a read-along with my friend Cassie. I'm very much looking forward to reading it for the first time. Is it going to live up to the movie? That remains to be seen there. I also plan on reading the book club read that Bevan has selected. I believe it's something about diet culture or something like that, something that we haven't touched upon quite yet. We've talked about nutrition in the past, but I don't think we've talked about diet culture. So looking forward to reading that. Usually I find if books are like not as interesting to me in the concept of it, especially with Bevan's book club reads, that usually means it's probably going to be a good thing. So we'll have to wait and see when I finish it. I also have the volume 1 of the Mask Omnibus. You know, the story about the guy who puts on a mask and becomes green, and based on related to the Jim Carrey movie, although the Mask comic books came first. Very much looking forward to reading it because, again, like the Mask movie was one of my favorite movies in my childhood, and it still holds a special place in my heart now because of Jim Carrey's performance. And I know that the Mask comic books are quite different from the movie. I think Stanley Ipkiss might be less likable in the comic books, but I'm still looking forward to seeing what they do with that series. I also plan on trying to get to the second book in the Wizard of Earthsea series, The Tomb of Atuan. Very much looking forward to returning to that, especially because the first book, The Wizard of Earthsea, was an amazing, like, monumental, I want to say, like, kind of earth-shattering experience for me. It made me realize, like, the true power of Ursula K. Le Guin's writing, and it makes me want more. Like, I've been reading her short stories, and they're good, but I don't think they're anywhere near the quality of The Wizard of Earthsea, and I really want to see what else she's doing in that series. I also want to read a book that I checked out from the library called The Grip. It's a horror haunted house type story, so don't know much else about it because it's a random library read, so it should be pretty interesting to see what that's about. And then I also want to get to Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. That was recommended to me by Lucas over at the Bits of Lit. He was describing it as incredibly violent and like kind of eye-opening about the West, or like honest about what America is truly like, or something like that. He said he had a good experience, although he had difficulty reading Cormac McCarthy because of his writing style. And that's one of the things I'm not really looking forward to, but also I've encountered a lot of different writing styles in my weird travels, so I don't really think it's going to be that much of a hindrance. But I've never checked out Cormac McCarthy before, so there's a first time to hate everything. I also have a number of short stories planned for the month of August. I plan on reading The Human Chair by Edogawa Ranpo. I actually already made a video about it, and it's going to be out on Tuesday at the time that I am talking in this current year and moment in time. And then there are others that I have planned, probably a bit more horror themed as we come closer and closer to October. But I also want to again check out more short stories from authors of different countries, different backgrounds, different cultures. And then I have a number of poems planned, including The Psychology of a Loser. Don't think anyone knows what that is, at least to anyone who's watching my channel right now. But that's for the first Poetry Thursday in August, and then I'll look for more as time progresses, and it should be a fun experience to read more poetry. Be on the lookout for that as well. Anyway, that was my wrap up and the TBR for the month of August. If you have any book recommendations that you would like to recommend, do so in the comments below. Let's have a discussion about books. Let me know if there's something in particular that you think I would like. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this channel if they do not already know about it, and they can check out my videos and have a discussion about books and what have you. Other than that, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and August travels. Farewell.